Greetings, fellow man. Servus Männer. It's Red Pill Germany again, and today I want to talk about social justice warrior calculus. So when I look, for example, at modern hiring practices and also admission policy at US colleges, and then the resulting student protests in Mizzou, for example, I have my own point of view when it comes to these issues, and I want to share it with you today. So I'm seeing the world more as quantitative, or in terms of numbers, in terms of quantifiable, observable features, basically. So maybe I'm one of those guys who has to spell out even trivial things, but maybe I want to try that today. So what is the opposite of affirmative action and social justice warrior gender quotas or race quotas? What is the opposite? The opposite is a meritocracy, where people who are able to do the job best get the job, and where people who get the best results in a job become promoted or can keep their work. They stay employed, right? Now, of course, you can only really apply these concepts to skills that are quantifiable, that you can easily numerically test and that you can compare to each other. For example, in the Olympic Games in track and field, athletic skills are tested and they are compared to each other. And then you have, for example, the time it takes for someone to run 100 meters or a marathon or lift a certain weight, etc. And also engineering, science are also things that you can study, that you can learn, that you have to train at, actually, just like in athletics, just like in sports. And the skill that you have can be numerically tested and compared to the skill level of others. Humor, by the way, is also a case where this holds true. Being funny or witty is actually a skill that needs a lot of verbal intelligence. And this is why, for example, Ashkenazi Jews are really good at writing scripts for sitcoms and comedy, like Seinfeld, for example. Now, I think a meritocracy does not really apply to arts or these things like painting or writing novels. I think there you wouldn't find a bell curve if you compare the artistic value of certain authors, because that's subjective stuff. So I'm really talking about sports or about physical fitness-based things or science, engineering, mathematics, these kind of things, okay? Now, what you find in these fields when you actually test for the skill level of the individuals and then you compare them is that they would all be distributed in a certain way. They would have, for one group, they would have a maximum around some score and they would have a certain width. Normally we describe these things, we can describe them in many cases by the Gaussian distribution, or it's also called bell curve or normal distribution. And this distribution has a mean value or a peak of mu and a width of sigma, and sigma is now just defined as the width in which roughly 68% of all the population is located. So if you take sigma to the left and sigma to the right, and in that interval of mu minus sigma and mu plus sigma, you will find roughly 68% of the population. And then if you go to mu minus 2 sigma until mu plus 2 sigma, you will have roughly 95% of the population included as the integral under the bell curve. Now, most people, for example, are familiar with IQ scores, which are roughly a Gaussian distribution. A lot of people say it's a power law, so the difference is normally important for the outliers or the very high sigma values, where you would actually have a plateauing and not really this strict decrease like in the Gaussian distribution. But just for the sake of argument, I want to work with the Gaussian distribution today. So for example, imagine there are two subsets of groups, or two groups basically, and one is a little stronger in a certain skill, whatever that might be, a quantifiable skill, than the other group. So you see here the blue curve has a mean value that in units of the red curve's sigma actually would be like 1/2 sigma to the right of the red bell curve, okay? And you also see that it's a little lower because it's also a little broader. You might not see it, but I calculated these curves so that the blue curve actually has a larger variance actually, and therefore, because they're both normalized distributions, the blue curve also gets a little lower in magnitude here, as you can see, because the total integral under both curves is 1 or 100%. So let's imagine we have a job application, for example, running, and we are considering a line of work or a pay grade where people for the red distribution would need to be between sigma and 2 sigma to the right of the mean value mu. That would mean, for example, let's take an entry-level engineer, for example. People who are not as smart, for example, would not really meet the qualifying criteria, or they wouldn't actually be able to finish their engineering studies. And people who are much smarter than that, they would probably get promoted really fast in that job and then not be in the steady state population in that department, for example, or they would aim for a different profession to begin with. They might be still in there, but just for the sake of argument, I excluded them now. So I would say that on average, roughly, you would find in that department at the entry-level engineering pay grade, for example, you would find people out of the red distribution of sigma to 2 sigma to the right of the mean value in a 100% clean meritocracy, where your intelligence or your skill level is really required or is measured and it's tested so that you can get this job and also keep this job. This is a meritocracy we're looking at now. And now we see that in that interval for the blue curve, in that same skill level interval, so to speak, there would be many more people. You see, I drew that in there, and you see the area under the curve is much larger because in this skill segment here, you just find more people of the higher skill population than of the lower skill population. And that means in a true meritocracy that is race blind, gender blind, color blind, whatever, blind to religion, it's only skill and qualification that counts. You would find a lot more people of the blue distribution or the blue group than of the red group. And that would be perfectly normal. That would actually be the way it should be. And now enter the egalitarian social justice warriors. Their ideology tells them that all groups are the same and there are no two groups that have a different sigma or a different variance or a different mu, right, when it comes to a certain skill. No, we're all the same, and therefore when you look in this department, all the workers of all the different possible groups and intersectional combinations should be exactly the same amount or exactly the amount of their total population contribution, right? Of course, this is nonsense, but a social justice warrior sees a department where most of the workers are actually from the blue distribution and the minority is only of the red population. So they say, oh, this is racism or sexism or choose your ism of the day, right? And so now, even though in the meritocracy every individual gets treated exactly the same and based on their skill level for an SJW, this is actually discrimination. And this is because they cannot differentiate between, they cannot make a difference between treating a group or looking at a big group like the entire staff of a department and the individual. Now, discrimination is something that happens to an individual, at least in the West, you know. And if you treat people the same, they would actually group according to their preferences and their skill levels in certain places. And now it becomes interesting. So now I show you what SJWs and leftists actually do, what kind of policies they implement, and how that can be graphically shown or conceptualized. So what they do is actually, for example, they have affirmative action laws and they have hiring quotas, and I want to make the example now of the admission policies at US college campuses. For example, what they do, we have three populations then, right? We would have Asian people that get actually tougher admission criteria, and then you have white people that are more or less in the middle, also by intelligence, by the way, and then you have black people, for example, who actually are admitted to a certain college campus, to a certain college, at a relatively lower skill level already, so that they will not be underrepresented at a college. Now, so in the case of these two populations here, what does that mean? That means that they actually move the goalposts. So they make it a little harder for the higher skill level population, and they make it less hard to get in for the lower skill level population. And that would look like this now. So now you see, with these moved and manipulated goalposts or admission rules, you see that a much larger subpopulation of the red group would actually be eligible, quote unquote, for getting into college here, and a much smaller group of the blue population would actually be eligible. You see that? The different areas under the curve now, the different integrals on our bell curves here. And now you have these new populations coming up that weren't there before. You have the green curve, for example, which is the people that would have been able to go to that college, but they have the wrong skin color. So they have to go to a community college or a college with a not so good reputation with lower entrance criteria. And then you have the red subpopulation, and these are the people who have actually been too dumb for a meritocracy to be admitted, but with the moved goalpost, thanks to affirmative action and quota policies, they actually make it into college. And now what happens? You will have now very smart people of the higher skill group, and you have actually on average not so smart people of the statistically lower skill group. And these individuals will now share a classroom and write the same term papers. And now think what will happen. You will have actually, for example, black people who are less intelligent being admitted to college, and you have from the higher intelligence group, average intelligence mind you, you select a subpopulation that is even smarter. So you have you selectively pick out intelligent Asian or white kids and group them together with selectively less intelligent black people to share the same classroom. Because the white people that are in that intelligence segment, they would have to go to a lower school, a community college or something, and the black people that would have normally gone to the community college actually make it to a probably mediocre or maybe even prestigious school. I mean, all this is relative, right? So you can move it left and right as you wish, okay? So what happens now, of course, is that these minority people, these people of color or something, they would sit in the classroom and stuff would be way over their heads. And the Asian kids, for example, they would be bored because they were only able to get into a college that they are much too smart for, because they got points deducted basically. So you have people who are almost bored and everything is super easy for them and they get really good grades and with maybe 70% effort, and you have people who, even if they give it their best shot, they really don't get it and they just lose the race in an academic way. And I think this is actually very cruel. And this is how the social justice warrior policies and these egalitarian left-wing social programs and this social engineering that they try to do, this is actually stirring these race riots, because they make the people of color, or these black people, for example, I want to stick with this example. I'm not generalizing. I'm just picking this Mizzou protest as a good example, because everyone knows what I'm talking about here. So what that actually does is it makes these black people feel inferior, and then they think, oh, this must be racism, because they want to protect their ego. They don't want to believe that they're stupid, and they actually shouldn't believe that they're stupid. They should just be in a different school. That's all. They should go to a community college or to a lower prestige university, whatever, and there is no shame in that. I know a lot of white people and I know a lot of Asian people who are really not that smart, but guess what? in a meritocracy, where you look at skill level, people would actually be distributed or filtered through their careers, through their academic or school life. They would actually be put in their right place when you select people by grade and not by skin color or gender. And then no one would feel stupid, no one would feel incredibly bored because stuff is just way too easy for them, and everyone could study and work at the place that is perfectly right for them and their skill level at that field that they chose. And that could be now athletic, it could be computer engineering, it could be humor, it could be it really applies to all the fields where you can, in a sensible manner, collect numeric data in tests and compare individuals to each other. For all those fields, what I just said is correct. And now, of course, if the social justice warriors want to have a motivation to tamper with the system, it has to be a prestigious job, of course. Yeah, otherwise they wouldn't bother. I don't think that they're overly concerned with gender or race inequality in some really undesirable or harsh fields, right? I just wanted to show you actually my little graphical representation of how I think that social justice warriors and these social engineers are manipulating these bell curves actually, or they're cutting around in the populations, and they would actually misallocate human capital, if you wish. Okay, I know that's a very technical, very cold term, but they would really put people in a place where they don't belong, where they're either not skilled enough or where it's actually boring for them, and people become frustrated in that way. And then, of course, the result is animosity between those groups, and they blame each other and they hate each other. And then you have what you saw in 2015 on college campuses throughout the United States. And this is why these gender policies and these quotas and these affirmative action things are really stupid, and we should really be colorblind. And I don't care if someone is black or yellow or white or whatever, as long as they're rigorously tested in their field and they fulfill the requirement and they're just as smart and hardworking as the other colleagues in the department or at the university or in the class, I have zero issues with that. But the problem is then just, if you have these affirmative action things and you have hiring quotas for women, for example, what does that mean for really high qualified women? You know, they always have to fight against this suspicion that they might just have been hired because of their gender. But if you don't have these quotas for women, then no one can say, oh, you just got hired because you're a woman. No, I mean, then she got hired because she had the right exam score or the right grades, the right degree from the right school, and she actually performs her work throughout the month just as well as any male coworker, for example. So I have zero issue with these things. So, and this is why I think that a meritocracy is overall better for social cohesion actually than these affirmative action laws. So please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching again and have a great day. Servus, Kameraden.